Direct from Montreal, Canada, this is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone is, well, people that have both served as co-hosts over the years. The one and only Alan Niven, of course, and the mighty Steve Brown of Trixter. Or is that the mighty Trixter? We'll find out. Anyway, good day, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing fabulous, Mitch and Alan. Great to be back on these lovely airways from sunny New Jersey, where it's a balmy 95 degrees and 110% humidity.
Which is about what we had here.
Yeah,
it's all good. I don't know how you deal with it.
Yeah, well, it's not so bad. You get used to it, and as I've known, Alan, you're in Arizona, and I've been out there when it's 115 degrees, and people have the nerve to turn around to me and say, "But Steve, it's a dry heat. I don't care." So my line to everybody on days like this heat wave that we're in here on the East Coast is I say, don't worry about it. It's a wet heat. It's a wet heat. It's good.
Now, you do realize. Hold on, you do realize that you just came up with the title of your next album, Wet Heat.
Or a great band name. I'm amazed nobody's trademarked that. We gotta look into that, Mitch. I'm gonna have to call my trademark attorney because I've become good at that over the last couple of years.
Yes,
And
so
I like that, Alan.
It also might be a great name for a porno. It's a porno title. Let's be honest. But the best is when you go to Arizona and they go, "Oh, it's 115, but it gets chilly at night." And you go, "Yeah, sure it does." Anyway, weather aside, we are here to talk about the new Tokyo Motor Fist album, of course, featuring Steve Brown. And who else do we have on there? We've got Chuck Berge, who has played with, Billy Joel for the last, 14 years? Greg Smith, who's done time with Ted Nugent, Rainbow, and Alice Cooper. And, of course, a singer, Ted Poley. And, fun fact, Chuck Berge does appear on the first Bon Jovi album. And so we will discuss who's better, Bon Jovi or Van Halen, later on in the episode. But first, Steve... talk to me a little bit about this album, because you've now done two. It is one of these Frontier Records super groups, but this one's going to tour, right?
Of course. Well, that's the one thing I like to say and tell everybody that separates us from most of these other bands. And look, no disrespect to the other bands and projects and super groups, yes, because we are definitely a super special group. We actually play gigs, and I think that's because we all live on the East Coast, so it makes our life a little easier. We actually rehearse together, and for all intent and purposes, this is our main projects right now. I've certainly, surprisingly, this has become my main thing, and I'm loving every minute of it because I love making music with these guys, and the response to the records, and wow, here we are. In this pandemic that I'm celebrating the release of the second Tokyo Motor Fist record. So, that is a feat in itself. As my label manager, Nick Teeter, told me, he said, "Steve, you should just be proud of the fact that you're releasing a record in 2020. And so, I'm always a positive guy. So I'm looking at the positive end of this. We put out a great record along with in the middle of this terrible situation that especially America is going through and that the world is going through right now. And I think it's an important record because of the message of positivity and uplifting great rock and roll that it has for everybody. So I think if everybody listens to this new record for the 45 minutes or 47 minutes that it clocks in at, it's going to make your life better. Hopefully it is, and I think it will. So I'm proud of that fact.
So will I. Now, talk to me about putting it together, because it is very much in-house. It is written by you, produced by you. You take to Instagram and you show you in the studio. There's a lot of, hands-on. Is it dangerous to not have a set of outside ears to produce it and have maybe somebody come in and say, "Ooh, I would do this differently. I would," just to sort of bounce ideas off? Or is it better just to say, "No, this is mine. I'm just going to do it this way"? So, talk to me about producing it.
Well, and Alan knows this as well as I do. You know, look, I've been making records for 30 years now, and I have a studio in my house for 27 years. I think I know what I'm doing at this point. If I don't, I should probably retire or quit. But look, man, all I can say is, as much as I love performing live and being out on tour, I loved and I fell in love when we made the first Trixter record, which was celebrating the 30th anniversary of 30 years of making records. I fell in love with being in the studio and became obsessed with learning about every detail of making records. I became obsessed, as much as I love the rock stars, Eddie Van Halen and Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, Kiss, you know, whatnot. I fell in love with Mutt Lange and Bruce Fairbairn and wanting to learn about making records and what they did to make these phenomenal records. You know, probably much like the way, Alan, you could say this, as much as you learned from like George Martin or Jeff Emmerich and, you know, Glyn Johns, the great British producers. I mean, that was what I did, as much as I was obsessed with, again, with, you know, Eddie Van Halen. I was that much, you know, in the 90s when I was making records, I was more influenced by, let's say, Mutt Lange than I was by, you know, another hard rock guitar player, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, and Mutt is by far one of the greatest producers ever. Alan, I'm going to ask you, when Trixter came out in the early 90s, mid 90s, how aware were you of them, and how did you sort of respond to their music? Because they did have a lot of great success. They charted. They went out on a very successful tour with Warrant and Firehouse and so on and so forth. Were they part of your purview, part of your scene?
Well, let me answer that quickly, but I want to go back to just make a comment about the studio.
Okay, go for it. Start wherever you want.
As far as Trixter were concerned, to be perfectly honest, if my memory has got good recall, it was at a moment when I was starting to think, my God, the highway is beginning to get really full of traffic here, and it's going to be really hard, even harder for the good players, the good singers, the good songwriters to be noticed, because all the fucking record companies have now got their formula going, and we're maxing out the formula and slowly diluting the whole scene. So it was really tough for me to spend time picking through and going, okay, who's really good over here? There's a really good guitar player in Trixter. There's, you know, a vocalist over here. I wish somebody could write a song over here. It was a really crowded period, and I was just happy that, you know, I got on the freeway when there was no traffic. And as regards being in the studio, I just have to agree 100% with Stevie. It is the most glorious sandbox that I've ever played in. I just love being in the studio and playing. But as far as self-producing or being in total control, the one thing that I found, and it still holds for me, is there's a particular magic about having one other person to work with, one other person to write a song with, one other person to lay tracks down with, one other person to tell you, no, you fucking suck, go and do it again. There's a particular magic in that. And I mean, you know, we can look across the rock and roll history and go, yeah, there might be a formula there that's worth keeping. You know, when you think of the great pairs and duos who produced extraordinary magic. And I mean, you know, top of that list probably has to be Keith and Mick, just for the sheer volume and consistency, even though that consistency kind of went away after Tattoo You. But, you know, what do you think, Steve?
Well, I totally agree with you. I've always been sort of a team player, but, you know, look, I think that no matter what, when you're making records, to have a team, and Alan, you were in it way before I was, but I say this all the time with you know, the biggest of hearts, that I am so thankful. Yes, we got onto the freeway late in the game, but listen, we were young and we were just happy to be, you know, I was just happy to start a car, if you know what I mean, and get a chance to pay the toll and get on the freeway, which we did. But with making records, yeah, it was always great back in the day when to have a producer, our first producer, Bill Ray, and his brother Jim and myself, we wrote those songs. Well, they took my songs and sort of Desmond Child and Mutt Lang them up and fixed things. But it certainly at an early age was a huge, huge learning process for me. And then on the second record, working with Jimbo Barton on the second Trixter record here, that was where I really discovered that magic of having somebody who I didn't really need much help with the songs on the second Trixter record, but I wanted someone who was going to sonically take it to another level. And that's what I got. And that was a great period when we were still making records like the old days in great studios where the band was all together. Those days are long gone. And like I said, I have such thankfulness for being able to make records in the old days and be able to make 2-track analog tape records and, to be able to do it, working in great studios like Sound City, like The Village, like the Enterprise in LA, Right Track in New York, Battery, the Power Station. I mean, those are things that bands nowadays will never get to do. So those were just magical times. And now, unfortunately, with the way the business is, you just can't work like that. But I'm certainly always into, and I'm never, as much as I'm a one, kind of a, the chef, if you will, in making my records, whether it's the last 2 Trixter records. PJ Farley, my bass player, has always been my sort of co-producer on all of that. And with Tokyo Motor Fest, I'm always open to anybody's suggestion. And on this new record, as you might know, I brought in, I did bring in some extra ears and some extra help. I brought in Bruno Ravel to help me mix the record, and he did a fantastic job on that. And he really, I have to give him credit for taking the record that was an already, I think, a fantastic record and taking it up a couple notches. And it was because I believe that this record was extra special. And I think, Alan, better than I do because you've been doing it a lot longer. You know that when you make records, sometimes you go, you know what? This is better than anything I've done in a long time. This is extra special and needs extra special attention. I think we need to bring another mixer in and bring a better mastering engineer in. So that was one of the things that I took away from this, that sometimes, no matter what, when you're doing it all yourself, take a step back and go, you know what? I think we need to take this up another level and bring some other ears in and some other talent to take it to another level.
Yeah, and Mayor Applebaum is a fantastic masterer. He mastered the second Kiss tribute I did a few years ago. Real quick, in terms of the recording process, was there all 4 guys in the studio at the same time, or was it really, let me send you the drum tracks, let me send you my vocal tracks, bounce it back and forth through email? How much of this was an email project and how much of it was 4 guys in a studio, sweating, breathing, playing together?
Sad to say, not much of that. The last record, the debut Tokyo Motor Fest record, Chuck did his drum tracks over here because Chuck lives in the next town over. But on this one, he wanted to explore, Chuck, I got to give Chuck Berge credit. He's not a spring chicken. He's not a little kid anymore. And the guy still is so hungry, like a little kid, for learning. So he was able to cut his drum tracks for the first time in his own house, in his own little studio. And he did a fantastic job. And I got to give him credit because he did a great job cutting the drum tracks, came up with some great parts. And again, in this age that we're in of recording separately and whatnot, I think no matter what, there is that band feel to it because we have that chemistry that we love playing together. We've played probably 7 or 8 live gigs, which, as you know, for any of these so-called supergroups, that's a miracle unto itself. So that's
a tour for them.
Well, yeah, that's a world tour. Yeah, considering, we've done Europe. We're on the Monsters of Rock cruise. We were in Belize, I believe, when we played one show, and we were somewhere in the Caribbean when we played another show. So yeah, it was sort of a worldwide tour. But Greg Smith did his bass track. Greg did his bass tracks in Pennsylvania. But Ted still comes up here to do vocals because Ted's very much, vocals to me are, in my opinion, the most important part of making these what we call melodic hard rock records. So it's very important that I'm there to be able to produce Ted and get him on the right track. And basically my whole attitude with making these records all along is I don't want to waste anybody's time. So if Chuck can do great drum tracks at his house and he can deliver what I say, he knows exactly. There's no gray area when we make these records. I say to him, brother, give me your best. You know what I want. We're not reinventing the wheel here. And he does that even more. Greg Smith does the same thing with his bass tracks. And when Ted comes here, he knows that he's going to walk out of here with, he doesn't have to work too hard, and we get great work done in a minimal amount of time. And that's what it's all about, maximizing when you're working, because as Billy Crystal said in Spinal Tap, mime is money, time is money, mime is money. But, so that's what we do. And all I can say is the results speak for itself. The record has a magical feel to it and certainly has that band camaraderie, even though we weren't in the room together for most of it.
Yeah, no, of course. I don't think we've actually mentioned the name of the album. It's called Lions, Tokyo Motor Fist Lions. Alan, I'm going to ask you this, and then I'm gonna seg it into asking Steve a question. But you had a replacement guitarist for Great White called Al Pitrelli. Now, Al's a great guy, but for some reason in Great White it didn't work. What was the major issue? And obviously I'm going to lead to Steve and how Steve prepares when he goes in for Dennis DeYoung or he goes in for Def Leppard. But talk to me quickly about Al Pitrelli and the Great White experience and where it sort of disconnected.
Well, let's get a little context first. Mark Kendall went down with a ruptured esophagus, which basically means he was bleeding out of his throat and ended up in the ICU. So it was an immediate emergency. We were in the middle of a Scorpions tour, and I had to find somebody who, at the very least, could stand on a stage and go through 3 chords that were approximate to the song. And God bless Al, I called Al and spoke to him and I said, listen, do you think that you can get a handle on the material quickly? And he said, with great East Coast braggadocio, I'll have it down by the time I'm off the plane. And I went, well, get on the fucking plane and get here fast because we're desperate. And thank you for coming. And so Al gets off the plane. By the time Kendall came back, Al was still struggling a little bit. But I think part of that was he was thrown in the deep end. He had no time to prepare. He was incredibly brave to put his guitar on and say, I'll handle it, guys. And I think that he found the material was deceptively simplistic. On the superficial blush, it's pretty straightforward, 1-4-5 bass, blues rock, but it was a little more subtle. And Kendall has a particular feel. And Al had a difficult time getting into Kendall's feel. But my God, he got on a plane and came immediately and saved our asses. And for that, I will always be grateful to Al. And just to, if I may, I was just going to make a suggestion, Steve. In this day and age of digital recording, where I have to chuckle because most of the time it seems that people now are trying to make things sound as analog and feel as analog as possible. One little trick I found was if you're laying drum tracks first, if you can get your rhythm guitar player in front of your drummer and play with the drummer while he's playing his tracks, it definitely helps give a little bit of that natural push and pull that you want in a song. Because, you know, if we wanted things that were perfect all the time, we'd still be using those awful fucking drum tracks, which I couldn't wait to take my 12-gauge shotgun to. I mean, you know, the imperfection is the perfection in recording lies in knowing which imperfections to keep. And a recording that speaks to me is one that's just got a little bit of breathing in it, that there's a little bit of push as you go into the chorus, and a little bit of pull as you come out and come into the verse, that it breathes and it's not regimented. If we wanted regimented music, we'd still be listening to fucking disco.
First of all, disco's kind of fun. What were the two drums back then? There were Linn drums, and what was the other one? The other sort of standard at the time? Linn and something with an S or something, right? I keep forgetting.
Well, the Simmons electric.
That's the one. Simmons and Linn. Huh.
Yeah. Which are, Alex Van Halen
hated them.
Oh, the good old days. But all right, so Steve, when you come into a situation like Def Leppard or Dennis DeYoung, you had to come in a replacement. How do you prepare? Do you sort of have that bravado and say, don't worry, guys, I got this? Or how do you study it and approach it now? And the Def Leppard one is unique because there's two guitarists and you've replaced both. So you've had to learn sort of the different versions of each songs. First of all, how challenging was that? But what is sort of your regiment to be stage ready?
Well, again, with Dennis DeYoung, I did the same thing that I did with Def Leppard. I filled in for both Jimmy Leahy and August Adger, both my dear friends and fabulous guitar players. So how I approach it is very, very old school. I do a thing that a lot of guys do, I think, where we I get an old school notebook, dollar store notebook, and I just label the front. I posted pictures of the Def Leppard one. I have one for everything that I've ever done, whether it's Rock of Ages on Broadway, Dennis DeYoung, Joe Lynn Turner. And I do it like I did when I was young, man. I would just go through the song. And basically, when time is not on your side to prepare a gig like this, you have to listen to the song the way it's recorded, or hopefully you'll get live versions. Leppard provided me with all the songs, the live versions in Pro Tools, and I was able to go through and make mixes of all of Viv's parts and all of Viv's vocals, all of Phil's parts, all of Phil's vocals. So that made it a lot easier. Dennis, it wasn't so easy, but you just have to go through and kind of, you got to use your brain and kind of listen and ask, if you don't have that Pro Tools mix of the live show, you have to go, well, what side is which guitar player? And then you find that out and you just break each song down. I just go through, first off, I go through the chord progressions, because I go, worst case scenario, if I can get through the full song just playing basic chords, you're 50% there. And you don't have to worry about all the, let's say, the bells and whistles, and making sure you get every guitar little bit. And that's really the most important thing. You got to listen and go, how am I going to get myself through these songs the simplest way that's going to sound the best? Because, let's be real. When you're playing arenas or stadiums, 98% of the people aren't going to notice every little 16th note arpeggio that you miss. And I think Alan, with Al Petrelli, I'm sure Al did the same thing, to where he did, the basics to get him through. And what you said about Great White kind of holds true a little bit with Def Leppard. When you listen to the stuff, it sounds a lot simpler than it really is. And the same thing with the Styx stuff. I got to tell you, man, learning the Def Leppard catalog and learning the Styx Dennis DeYoung catalog, that stuff was a hell of a lot harder than I ever imagined it would be. And this is coming from a guy who's a devoted Van Halen, Randy Rhoads fan who knows all that stuff. And then here I am playing like the Def Leppard stuff, tripping up on things that sound simple. And I was going, man, this stuff is a lot harder than it sounds.
Right, let me ask you this. Since you're playing the Styx catalog and the Def Leppard catalog, and then you're going to go record Tokyo Motor Fist and other albums, does it change your playing? I mean, have you learned stuff? Because you just said, listen, it's a lot more complicated than you think. Does it alter the way you play? Have you learned from it? Do you incorporate some of that into Tokyo Motor Fist or Trixter or Eric Martin Band?
Everything. I mean, look, I've been with Def Leppard now in the wings for 8 years. So everything that I do, I lived and breathed that music and had to be ready at a moment's notice. I'm always on call with them. So it's part of it always has been part of my DNA. And I say this all the time. It always helps to fill in for a band that is one of your favorites. I mean, Def Leppard, hands down, is my top three. It's Kiss, Van Halen, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, after that. So, that always is a huge help because whether I played the songs or not, I knew every song. It was in my blood because I've been listening to the stuff since I discovered Leppard in 1980. Of course, Leppard was such a huge influence on me starting Trixter at such a young age because I looked at Rick Allen when I read about Def Leppard the first time. I read the drummer's 16 years old, and I was like, oh my God, if he's 16, I can do this. So I'm going to start my own band at 12. And that's what I did. I think before that, I thought there was, it was like you had to be at least 18 to start a rock band, and I learned from Rick Allen and Def Leppard that you didn't have to be 18 or 21 to go out on tour. So, huge inspiration there. So with the Dennis DeYoung thing was different because I didn't grow up a huge Styx fan. I liked the music, I appreciated it, but it wasn't my bag. And so learning that catalog, I became such a huge fan and learned the brilliance of the songwriting of Dennis DeYoung and the brilliance of Styx. And Styx and Def Leppard over the last 5 years have become an integral part of everything I do. So if you listen to the new Tokyo Motor Fist record, Lions, you're going to listen to Monster and Me. There's a huge Def Leppard Mutt Lange influence on that. Listen to my favorite track on the record, the title track, Lions, which Dennis DeYoung played the keyboard solo. That is influence. I wouldn't have written that song had it not been for playing with Dennis for the last 5 years and playing with Def Leppard, because it's given me such a different set of colors to work with, playing shapes and playing chord progressions and playing arpeggios that I never would have played, that I incorporated. And the confidence level as a songwriter, performer, singer, guitar player that those bands have given to me, it enabled me to just go, you know what? I'm going to write a song that's 6.5 minutes, and I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I want to do something bold, unique, much like Bohemian Rhapsody. I make the joke that Lions is my Bohemian Rhapsody. I never wrote a song with that many chord changes before. Playing with Dennis, playing with Def Leppard has given me that confidence to be able to say, you know what, I can do this, and I'm going to make it as great as it can possibly be.
Yeah, well, it turned out great. One thing I'll say, since you mentioned Trixter, it is the 30th anniversary of Trixter, and of course the great song "One in a Million." I know there were plans for the band to go celebrate this somehow, or at least members of the band, maybe not the whole band. Obviously, COVID put that on hold. But how do you sort of celebrate the 30th anniversary now? I mean, do you do a lockdown video? Do you do a special streaming show? How do you sort of look back and say, hey, man, 30 years?
Well, first off, I just turned 50 a week and a half ago. So we're celebrating that and the 30th anniversary of the first Trixter record. First I got to go is how the fuck did I get so old? And God help me. But,
hold on. Let me stop you right there, Stevie. Hold on a minute. Somebody I know whose name I won't mention, who wears a top hat,
yes,
called me up on his 49th birthday and had a total meltdown on me because he was going to be 50 on his next birthday. And how did that happen? And how is he going to deal with it? And I told him this. I said, Slash, if I could have one decade to relive, it would be my 50s. It'll be the best combination of body, mind, soul, and ability that you will experience in your life. And now look at what he's done in his 50s. Of course, the other side of this is when I was 40, I went and had a thorough medical. I was under stress and anxiety all the time, dealing with GNR and so on, but came out of the tests really well. And the doctor looked at me and he said, you should basically be like this until you're 60. And of course, I was stupid and turned around and I asked, well, what happens at 60? To which the doctor replied, well, it's all downhill from there. But your 50s will be the best time, Stevie, of your life. I guarantee it.
That's right. And by the way,
the decade of your greatest accomplishment.
Of course it will be. And Alan, if you had actually managed Bon Jovi and listened to David Geffen, you wouldn't have had all that anxiety. See? I'm telling you, that was a bad move to not take John's call. I'm telling you.
I'd have had even more anxiety.
But
I've had enough control freaks to deal with in my life.
Well, hey,
there you go.
You can manage the Trixter reunion tour next year. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
But so what is the plan though for this 30th? I mean, so you turned 50. Happy birthday.
Well, thank you so much. As Joe Elliott so eloquently told me, he said, "Welcome to hell, man." But hey, man, what I can say, one thing, and Alan, you'll appreciate it. I'm at my 50th birthday. I'm also celebrating 15 months of sobriety. I finally entered a new phase in my rock mania, and extremely happy about that. So I do agree with you. My father said to me, my dad's 85 and, probably my biggest fan, and he's also my idol. He said to me, Steve, are you ready for the second half of your life? Are you ready for the third and fourth quarters? He's a big sports athlete and, so everything is in sports terms. And I said to him, Dad, you know what, man, these next 50 years, and I'm hoping I get to live another 50 years, but the first 50 was the first half was just the warm up. Now we're really, and I think honestly, the best is yet to come. And again, with this new album, I feel like it's my best work to date. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm so clear now and operating at a top-notch level. And so getting back to Trixter, here we are, 30 years later. Wow, I guess without Trixter, I wouldn't be here talking to both of you guys. So that's an honor right there. And look, what we accomplished was, the 1% of all musicians we got to do. Every dream I ever had came true 1,000 times over. I'm working with Universal.
Stevie, do you know what the approximate odds were of success once you got a contract in LA?
I really don't. I just go by like 1%.
Think about this for a moment. Think about this for a moment, but there was an attorney who turned around to me one day and said, once you get a contract, your odds of success are approximately 1,000 to 1. So for you to have achieved what you've achieved already in your life is tremendous, but then you're a really good player.
Yeah. Look, and I say it all the time, big guy. I'm certainly one of the luckiest guys in the world. I work my ass off to be here. Still practice like I was 13 years old, singing, writing, playing guitar, so I appreciate the kind words, my man. And, and likewise, we'll get back because I got some questions for you, Alan, that we're going to grill you on in a little while.
Well, go for it now. But just real quick on Trixter, if you haven't checked out Human Era, a new audio machine, the last two releases, just fantastic stuff. Human Era in particularly was super, super strong, melodic, fun. There was a Road of 1,000 Dreams that was re-recorded. It was just anyway, we need more, but okay, let us put Alan on the hot seat. Why not? This is like
on the griddle.
It's like a Johnny Carson sketch or something. This is great.
Yeah, without a doubt. And aren't we celebrating today the release of the debut Guns N' Roses album that changed so many lives, and I'm sure changed Alan's life forever?
Yes. For fans, we are recording this on July 21st, and of course the album came out on July 21st, 1987, I believe it was. So yes. Happy anniversary, Alan.
Yes, in the last millennium. Oh, thank you. bring back the memories and all the anxieties again.
Did you call Axel? That's my only question.
No, and he hasn't called me either.
Fair enough. But I will give the floor to Steve. I will hit the mute button. Steve, you're on.
Well, I wanted to just ask Alan, because I just love hearing these stories because, I knew what it was like when we started getting that momentum. And I just want to ask Alan, Alan, what was the coolest part of the Guns N' Roses ride? Was it before they hit it, when you knew that the momentum, when you could see the song going up the charts, when you'd get the radio reports, when you knew that the engine was really starting to rev? Was that the most exciting part of the Guns N' Roses experience? Or was it, let's say, when Sweet Child of Mine finally broke and all hell broke loose? I'm curious to hear what your take is on that, because I have my own opinions on my career when Trixter started taking off, and then once we finally, let's say, hit the peak. So I'm curious to see what your take is on the Guns N' Roses. And again, happy anniversary, and I hope that you take some time to enjoy the good times. Forget about the stress and the anxiety.
Well, for me, particularly with Guns, the coolest moments for me were gigs that made me proud. The Ritz, which I think was February 2nd, 1988. That was a cool moment because that was the band exhibiting that they had a sense of themselves, of their power, and of their potential at an early and critical moment. And that was an amazing night. The fact that I had to spend, I had both bands on that bill that night, and I had to spend the interval, finding the right bandana for his nibs because he was having a freak out. Like everybody, Axl has stage fright. There was one day at Farm Aid, I was standing next to Don Henley, and he was a little bit jittery. So I made a wise-ass comment, a dumb wise-ass comment to him about, oh, you got nerves, Don. You know, hard for me to imagine that Don Henley, with his history, would have nerves. And he turned around and he looked at me and he said, you all don't have butterflies in your stomach before you go on stage, then you don't know what you're about to have to try and do. And, everybody gets it. But it was the gigs. I mean, there was one in Philadelphia that I remember that was just incendiary. And those are the coolest moments. A lot of the rest of it was stress and was anxiety. I knew what I was getting into when I signed a contract with that band. I'd done my research. I'd turned them down twice, or turned down being part of the cattle call for a manager twice. And I knew it was going to be stressful and difficult. And in hindsight, I can say that my sense of the carefree in being involved in rock and roll evaporated in September of 1986 when I signed that contract. The other thing is that it's a great privilege to be involved with something that is that momentous. I try to avoid the word success, because I think success is usually a figment of an envious mind. But with moments like being number one in Billboard for the first time, I'd sit there in my office and look at it and go, I thought I'd feel different. This isn't going to change my life. And it's really just a number. It doesn't matter. Because ultimately what matters is what you write, what you record, and how good it is, and whether it stands the test of time. So if you have songs that are being played on the radio now, then you've done it. You've achieved it. Your life has been worthy and worthwhile, because those songs provide, at the least, entertainment, and sometimes maybe a little bit of insight, and sometimes a little bit of fortitude. When I was a kid growing up in England, I started to feel more and more alienated in my school and in my family, and the only things that made sense to me were the records that spoke to me. So there's a profound value in it, and to contribute that to the world is better than becoming somebody at a military school or going and fighting in Afghanistan or beating up protesters. It's a better contribution to life. So you should feel really, really good about that, Stevie.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
And of course, music does provide salvation sometimes, too.
Yeah. Oh, of course it does. I mean, it's, kind of music, I say.
Mitch.
Yeah.
Mitch, I thought you were going to say sometimes you get kissed by salvation.
You do. You do get kissed by salvation. And then sometimes you get inspired, like by the Scorpions. But all right, Steve, go ahead.
So the other question I had is, Alan, when they finished recording Appetite for Destruction and you got when you guys mastered, I think George Marino mastered it. Were you there with them when they finished mastering the record?
Of course I was there. Damn straight I was going to be there. For one thing, George was the master of mastering, and to be in his, and I'll call it laboratory, his sonic laboratory, and have him work on something was always enlightening and a little bit of an education. And, when you're recording, somebody has to hold the vision. So in a studio, if I was producing, yes, I'd have an open ear. Yes, I'd want people to feel that they'd been able to make their observations and contributions. But basically, I felt the responsibility of holding the vision. So there was a little part of me that was like, well, yeah, you can make that observation, but it's wrong and I don't care because I have to hold the vision on this. The minute you walked into George Marino's room, it was like going and getting your homework graded. And it was the one moment that in any recording process, I'd feel intimidated as I handed over the half-inch to George. And the most magical thing that George would ever say to me was, you pretty much got that. All I'm going to do is add 1 dB at 16K to put a little bit more air in there, and there you go. And that would be like I got an A on my essay.
Sure. Oh, that's fantastic. Now, when you heard the record for the first time, did you have any idea the effect it would have, and the fact that Guns N' Roses, I mean, I put Guns N' Roses as one of the, top 5 biggest rock bands ever, I mean, and that record was groundbreaking for the time, especially, and it certainly changed the landscape of the whole 80s hard rock thing. Did you have any idea how sort of culture changing and musical landscape changing that record would be?
Oh, good God, absolutely not. My concerns are immediate and in detail. And in terms of the record itself, I had to dismiss the first person that Geffen wanted to produce the record and sit Tommy Zutaut down and say, listen, this is what we've got to do here. And we've got to find somebody who can conform to this philosophy. And the philosophy that Tom and I had was, let Guns N' Roses be Guns N' Roses. And we did not want them being smoothed out. Mutt Lange is brilliant, but Mutt Lange is probably the perfect example of who should not make a Guns N' Roses record and couldn't make a Guns N' Roses record. We wanted the spirit of the band and the feel of the band to be uncompromised. And once I got final mastering, I knew I was going to be in for a really tough time at radio. Radio, AOR, wouldn't just not touch us. They called us out as being leprous and a pox on the world when we first put the record out, and pinched their noses for the aroma. And having that perception from the get-go, the strategy I had for breaking the band was entirely based on press and getting to England first and getting a relationship, either good or bad, but a relationship of noise with the British press, because I felt that we had to break out of England first. You know, England's a small island. It's easier to make a mark there than it is on continental USA, where you have so many radio stations you have to pull in. You have to get through the MTV door. In England, you can get to your audience more directly and more quickly if you're smart about it. So that's why all my initial work and effort was through England first. And of course, you know, I'm no genius. I just sit there and watch what other people do. I watch Tom Petty being a star in England while they were still playing clubs in the USA. Jimi Hendrix broke out of England. J.J. Cale broke out of England. The Pretenders, who were a London band, but have got an American swagger to them because of Chrissy, you know, they were on fire in England long before they were known in the USA. So there was no sense of, oh, this is going to be a slam dunk and it's going to go over the fences easily. And if you think like that, you're probably going to set yourself up for a problem. You've got to hope for the best and expect the worst, like in most situations, and plan that way. So, no, I didn't think it was going to change the world. I was just happy that when Eddie Rosenblatt took me out, he was president of Geffen, he took me out for a lunch just before Christmas in '87. And this was the guy who wanted to drop the band before they even started recording. And he looked at me and he said, you know, you've done a good job here, kiddo. And it's time for you to bring the band back and start thinking about a second album. And I was apoplectic. You know, we were at 250,000 sales at that point with no radio airplay and no MTV. And I looked at it and I said, there's no way I'm going to do that, Eddie. I said, we're going to keep playing, because let me tell you something. If we get just a smidgen of airplay or just a little bit of MTV airplay, where do you think we're going to be? Because we're already at 250,000. So over that holiday, Tom and I managed to turn the company's head around and support us going forward. And of course, you know, by March they were gold, and on April 7th they were platinum. And then, I don't know if you know the legend of Sisyphus, the guy who has to push the rock up the mountain all the time. Well, we got the rock to the top of the mountain, and then it started rolling down the other side, and we had to run like hell to try and keep up with it. You know, then it became something bizarre. I remember the first time I went, oh, things have changed. Slash and I were in a town car driving down Manhattan, going to Electric Ladyland studio. And as we were coming up to, I think it's 6th or 4th Street or 8th Street, and we're about to turn left, there were people who were starting to run after the car because they saw Slash in it. And at that moment, I knew our worlds were upside down.
For sure. That's incredible, man. And I got to tell you, I remember the first time hearing Guns N' Roses when we were out at one of the clubs that we used to play at. There was this great club in New Jersey called Studio One, which is, I think, one of the clubs that we got signed out of. And a lot of the East Coast bands played there. And I remember the first time I heard Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle. And I still have the vision in my head. And it was, for me, the moment that I knew that they were going to be something. And it was just a funny thing because it's quintessential Jersey, and you'll probably laugh at this, but I was standing there in the club and I heard this song. It was the beginning of Welcome to the Jungle. And I'm like, oh man, it's fucking cool. It's kind of got the Van Halen. It's got the Eddie Ain't Talking About Love with the delay on the guitar. And then it kicked in. Right. And I remember that I looked over and I saw these two beautiful girls who were total 80s Jersey girls, and they were dancing like, again, not to go back to the disco era, but they were dancing like they were on Dance Fever with Denny Terrio to Guns N' Roses, Welcome to the Jungle. And when that riff kicked in and I saw these girls dancing, I said to myself, who the fuck is this band? This is cool as hell. That guitar sound just blew me away. And then it was right after that when I got the record, after discovering who they were. But that vision was that thing where I said to myself, I knew these guys were going to be huge. Did I know they were going to be one of the biggest bands in rock history? And of course, look at what they've done. A band who kind of imploded in the 90s and then came back. What is it? 25 years after they imploded? Is it 25 years when they got back together with Slash and Duff and Axl?
Something like that.
Okay.
Well, 2016. So yeah, 2025. Yeah.
Okay. To be able to come back and basically right out of the gate sell out stadiums all around the world and make back all the money that they lost in the 90s and make more money than they ever did in their career and be bigger than they were. That's a testament. But that moment for me in North Newark, New Jersey, which is not a pretty part of New Jersey, kids, to see that and that site in a seedy rock and roll club and to see these girls, which I tell you, they were like Bon Jovi chicks and they were dancing like I couldn't imagine what I was seeing. It's still etched in my memory. And for me, that was the moment that I knew that this band is a real deal and that I fell in love with them and I knew they were going to take off.
That's a great observation, Stevie. If the girls are there, the boys will be there. I was working with this band that I'd signed that had been thrown out of every record company in LA. And I was working at a tiny little distribution company down in the South Bay of LA. So, bottom of the barrel, we were under the barrel. And their manager came in and brought a record and one of the owners of the company asked me to evaluate it, and I listened to it, and I thought, well, it's a fucking mess, but there's a couple of great rock and roll songs on here. So I persuaded the company to sign them, and they did. The next thing they did was, I think it was 3 shows at the Whiskey, and then they had a show at the Glendale Civic. And when I got to the Glendale Civic, I looked around, and I looked at the girls there who were all stunning blonde Southern California girls wearing clothes that I can only describe as pre-ravaged. And I looked at that and I went, hello, we're definitely onto something here. And that was Motley, and that was my observation. I saw the girls and I went, we're onto something here. We can do something.
Certainly. I mean, that goes back to the Beatles. I mean, geez, and even early, all rock and roll, with Elvis. So the girls started it and then the guys will come. But, it was just a funny story. And again, it was like a scene out of one of these movies that you see. It could have been out of, if we did an 80s version of Almost Famous, to me, that would be that part in the club where all of a sudden, welcome to the jungle starts.
Let me ask you, what did you think of the Motley movie?
Well, I thought it was fun, I mean, it definitely, it was definitely a vanilla version of it, because you were there and I was there for a little bit of it. And, look, man, Motley's one of my favorite bands. And, look, anytime, I'm a sucker for all those movies. I just watched the Runaways movie the other night. I love all things documentary, behind the music, all of the books. And, I just can't get enough of it. So, I love the Hollywood adaptations of the way these things come out sometimes.
Yeah, well,
I'm glad you're amused, but you're an East Coast guy, but God, I hate most Hollywood movies. If you haven't seen it, do take in the Netflix ZZ Top documentary. That's got a bit of style to it.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I watched that. I love that. And that was cool because I never knew much about the early ZZ Top. So to learn that those guys, been playing together, Frank and Dusty, those guys have been playing together since they were 15 years old, and Billy yep. came in a little bit later. And the fact that they're still together, the 3 of those guys, a testament. And, their dedication, Bill
awesome.
Ham, unbelievable.
Awesome.
Great stuff. And we called them a ZZ Top up here, by the way. ZZ Top. But yes.
ZZ Top. I just watched the other great one the other day, who was somebody I didn't really know about, who now I'm in love with, which is Susie Quattro. And I never knew how massive Susie Quattro is around the world. I remember her as Leather Tuscadero on Happy Days when I was a kid, not realizing that Susie was worldwide, huge in Australia, huge in Europe, huge in Asia. I mean, unreal. And what a great documentary on her as well. So, yeah, that's my affinity for, and I could talk to you, Alan, and someday we are going to break bread, have dinner, and have some coffee. And I want to hear about all the really good, juicy details that we can't talk about on the air, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes.
It would be my pleasure. I will look forward to that.
But it'll have to be in Arizona, because Alan's going nowhere. He's not moving. Man on his mountain.
This is true.
It's okay.
I'm all for it, man.
The next time Def Leppard rolls into town, he'll put you on the guest list, and you'll eat their catering. It'll be perfect. Nobody's going to pay for anything. It's fantastic. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be good to see Def Leppard and come and say hello to the leprechaun again.
Yeah, the leprechaun.
Of course.
But on that, of course, the Tokyo Motor Fist Lions available now. And if you get the Japanese version like I did, you get a Tokyo Motor Fist button and a bonus track, which who doesn't want bonus track? We love our bonus tracks. But Steve, Alan, toujours un plaisir, always a pleasure. There we go. Any more questions, or are we done?
Steve, a pleasure. Always good to talk with you.
Yes, you likewise, Alan, man. I'm always thinking about you. And again, like I said, thank you for the stories. I know the listeners will love, your little take on that little old band from Hollywood, Guns N' Roses. Those little stories that you tell about those feisty cats. But I appreciate it. And again, I can't wait till we can actually hang and really get into the nitty gritty of it all.
No, I agree.
I'll be into it.
Yeah, it'll be we need to get out there. We need to get to shows, but hopefully, COVID will pass and then we can get to it. But anyway, on that, merci, gentlemen, a great pleasure. And we did an hour. Can you believe that? Fantastic.
I can certainly believe it, because you know what? We're good together. The three amigos. There we go. All right, guys. All the best. All my love to you. All my love to your family. Have a great day, Stevie. You got it. Thanks, Alan. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Cheers.
Here's Paul Stanley to tell you why he doesn't want to shake your hand.
Some people might have a little rock and roll pneumonia.
Not even cold gin will kill those germs. This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.